Hello, everyone. Here to show you right here. Talk about for the 5 minutes more speech right here, and I'm sure most of us have been there to where if you're going to have any sort of meeting or like any sort of a conversation with somebody in particular, let's just say if it's with a doctor or a nurse or anybody like that, or like a job interview. But what does it usually mean whenever somebody asks you for 5 more minutes of your time? And most of the time, it's like, well, that's really the case about if they take interest in what you do. And a lot of times that you probably are thinking too is to where a number of things that's come to your mind, such as if it's if you want to call the person, okay, well, okay, yeah, you want to give this person a nickname, such as maybe the chocolate covered princess or anything like that, or the prince, Prince Handsome or whichever you want to call it. But still, but what does it usually mean whenever somebody wants, at least 5 minutes more of your time? And let's just say that if they're anxious to find out about something, and a lot of times it's like, could also be related to about, yeah, hi, that they're going to go ahead and, show me, show me how you do that. And let's just say the conversation starts out like that, and then they're going to go include like maybe quotation marks or maybe parenthesis marks or maybe anything such as okay, question mark, question for you, and then they're going to go and add on another sentence such as to where explain, explain how you configured that. So whenever we think about stuff like that, and like if you're going to be starting a conversation, and let's just say that you go ahead and yeah, something like show me how you do that, and talk about together though, for who's saying what, and let's just say that if you get somebody else to join the conversation, and like I think on too that if you invite somebody else to join the conversation, and the source of language and the source of comments that you see, but still that mainly talking about 5 minutes more of your time. And let's just say that people ask politely though that together can we talk about that promotion. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that, yeah, any words that are going to include any sorts of parentheses or, dashes or anything like that. And a lot of times you want to know too that, yeah, anything that involves any sorts of conversation though. And you want to know too that, whenever you do, start, yeah, like you might say that you'll get used to something, but a lot of times it's like whenever you're trying to work on something, a lot of things are coming to my mind, and a lot of times it's like whenever you show somebody something, and or if anything, that it's through the email. Like people are going to email you and say that, hey, show me some of your work. I came across your resume or anything like that. But still, that I know that whenever you do talk to somebody in person, a lot of things that come to your mind or anything. But still, that I know with me though that it sure seems that way. That how many of us are really going to keep track of time whenever it comes to if you're trying to work on something, or that maybe that if you're trying to take your lunch break or something like that, or if you were off at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock or whichever. But still, that you want to know too that everybody else might say that, well, really, if that's really a question, and like anybody else will probably want to know too, that if somebody were to ask you the question on during a job interview, such as how well are you at cleaning up messes? Are you good at cleaning up messes? And so let's just say that if the question goes by as to where how well at cleaning up messes. Yeah, how well are you at cleaning up messes? And if that's supposed to be a question, or if you want to put like any source of a exclamation point or a quotation mark right there, whichever. And like if you want to add something like good, good, excellent. If you even want to take a guess, to where impressive, good, excellent, or I'll go ahead and just put on here impressive. So any questions that you might have, I guess, so if you want to call it, is this toward anybody who's going to maybe want your feedback about anything that you're doing, and the questions kind of remain as to where that, yeah, well, really that, the questions and answers and responses about something, but still that if people were to ask you for at least 5 more minutes of your time, what exactly are they really trying to say? Is to where if they're just concerned, or if that's just another way of their willingness toward it, yeah, well, we just want to make sure that we have everything correct, and most of the time that's the case. So a lot of times everybody else will probably say to you, yeah, you'll get used to it. It's almost all the time. Whenever if your interview was scheduled for to be at least 10 minutes, if you have 10 minutes to ask each candidate at least 3 remaining questions, or whichever caught, and then you'll want to know too that what's one important fact about getting used to something. Well, what exactly does that mean necessarily? And so it's like, yeah, well, really, we really have to be on track of time? Do we really have to keep track of time whenever it comes to working on something and getting busy with something? And I guess a lot of the question goes by as to where it really, that all depends on what goes on. But I tell you one thing, though, that if we're talking about the opinion by that other individual, if you're talking to somebody else, and let's just say if you have 2 other people who want to speak up about something, then chances are that, yeah, well, I guess you could say that, you can go and get used to that. If you have somebody else who wants to speak up about that topic, to where if they've seen something else that they want to speak up about, whichever, but still, that whenever we're talking about that, yeah, whenever people want to buy more of your time, a lot of times it's like, yeah, well, really, that what exactly does that mean necessarily? And are they really? I'm like, everybody else might say that that's usually around the time they're trying to get you to buy something, or yeah, they're wanting to get some information to help improve their company or their business, or for that promotion, or whichever you want to call it. But I just really think too that what does it mean when we get used to something? And I'll go and right on here. It means that you get you get adjusted. Yeah, you get adjusted. You get yeah you get adjusted. You get adjusted to where that practice, that source of practice, does not bother you as much. And on the other hand, that talking about for any source of quotations or anything else that you want to add, that it's like, yeah, that talking about whenever something, something that does not bother you as much. It does not bother you, yeah, it does not bother you as much. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, whenever you get adjusted to something, and so whenever we think about that right there, and at 102 is to where, yeah, with a lot of these adjustments and all that, but still, for anything that you want to add, and but still, you have here, you start the conversation, but you're still that. So it's like, yeah, whenever you do start a conversation with somebody about something, or whichever it is, and you probably thinking too that almost everybody else will probably say that, yeah, well, what does it usually mean whenever somebody wants to buy more of your time? Well, is that really about getting used to it, or that's really just about is to where keeping somebody else occupied, keeping somebody else entertained? But I just really think though that yeah, well, it's been a year since most of us were able to see Lava, going to those restaurants, in person interview and all that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that whenever we think about that, though, the word in speech, though, is to where that whenever you're going to be talking to somebody about something, and, you probably thinking is to where, yeah, well, we try to talk for a half an hour at the most. 15, 20 minutes, maybe a half an hour. Do you think that maybe a half an hour? I'm like, yeah, I'll talk about maybe a half an hour longer. And if we're talking about a meeting, a conference meeting, or any source of discussion of the matter, and you want to know too that the first thing that I usually see during a lot of these interviews is most of the time is about, yeah, talking about the details. And sometimes it's like, well, really, that whenever you're talking to somebody about something, what does you usually mean whenever an interview that only lasts for 5 minutes? Well, chances are that you're not the person that they're looking for, or, yeah, well, they still don't understand what you're talking about unless if you show them some examples or whichever. But I just really think, though, that for the most part, that if you can go ahead and get into like a conversation to where if you talk to somebody, if you meet somebody, and let's just say that I'm like, yeah, your conversations and your conversations could be explained in a variety of ways, of course, but it's like, yeah, that, any comments and maybe feedback and all that, but still, that if you want to start out the conversation by saying is toward it, for, how did you find, how did you find the data? How did you find the data? And like, it sure seems that way that you want to start the conversation like that. And like everybody else will probably say too, yeah, especially if you're going to be on that Twitter account, or if you're going to be maybe on Instagram, or maybe Facebook or any other social media site, and the first thing that you maybe want to talk about, the first thing that you would maybe want to mention about is toward it really, how did you guys meet? How did you find the work? And so it's like, yeah, well, really, that that maybe that should be the question that should be explained, and of course, and besides all the other details, but still, that talking about getting used to something, what does that usually mean whenever you get used to something? It's like, well, you just think about things. You just think about it. You don't even have to set a reminder or anything like that. You just think about it. You just do stuff, and so it's like, I guess whenever you get into that situation to where you just start doing stuff automatically, that's usually the time whenever people say that. That's whenever they say that they're used to it, and that they don't even think twice about, okay, having to set reminders. And I guess that's really what it's about, is to where that whenever you're used to something, that no need there's really no need to set reminders. So whenever you do like, yeah, reminders are usually take place, reminders are just to remember, yeah, it's like a little, if you want to kind of call it like a little upkeeper, if you want to kind of call it, the upkeeper, something that kind of keeps you on track of something, on track. And so when we think about that, though, necessarily, and you're probably likely want to know too, that why is it that that whenever if we're talking about people who want to buy more of your time, or who want to use more of your time, especially during an interview, and you're likely want to know too that most of the time, though, it's like, well, really, that what is that really telling anybody necessarily? And you want to know too that for most of the time, though, that any meetings or training sessions that do wind up taking longer than 15 or 20 minutes. And you might think too that some of them that do last up to a couple of hours. And you're likely want to know too that if that's out of the question, to where if you think that something could possibly be a waste of time later on, or maybe if you had to read redo that whole meeting process. Maybe something went wrong toward that. A lot of the transcript information, a lot of that data was not recorded from the original meeting, so you had to redo the process. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that whenever we talk about getting used to something, that I guess that's another way of how doctors can even say too that where you don't even have to, you don't even have to set reminders about. You don't even have to think about that. Too much of time. You just automatically do stuff, and so that's why it sure seems that way. That some people may say, well, it don't really bother me too much of time. It don't really aggravate me or bother me, but still. But if we're talking about that, anything that you could be working on, but a lot of times anybody say that whenever you do start talking, to somebody about something, a lot of times it's over emails, and email service and emails most of the time. And everybody else might even say that, email service, and so if you want to start the conversation, by saying this to where very interesting or something like that. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. And, you're going to use like maybe an exclamation point or maybe, maybe the number sign. Number, go ahead and put on here space, number sign, number 5 or something like that, or number 1. And I know a lot of managers would maybe say that you go ahead and put number 1 or number 2 just to say that that's just about the category for how they read those ticket orders by is that they're going to be putting in any request to talk to anybody. Then there's going to be like what you call a certain order, a certain category that they go by, and so that's why it sure seems that way. That a lot of times it's like, how many of us are really going to be paying attention to too much of that compared to other things that they come to your mind whenever you do have meetings about stuff, and you're likely thinking too that, you really want to ask that question to where about, besides, cleaning up your messes and cleaning up, solving problems and all that, that in case if anybody were to ask you about that, is to where that, are you good at cleaning up messes? I'm like, really, are you good, are you good at cleaning up messes? Yeah, cleaning up messes. Are you good at cleaning up messes? And you're likely thinking too, well, that all depends. You start the next sentence by that all depends. And then you go and put parenthesis or comma quotes or anything. I'm like, that all depends. Apostrophe or anything, but still that are you good at cleaning up messes? And then for what's what are we calling good necessarily? I might talk about for messes. Well, what are we calling good? So you want to start the conversation. You like anybody else will probably say too that if you're going to start any sorts of conversation, really, you want to spell, depends. That all depends. Are you good at cleaning up messes? And then, if you want to include maybe another question mark would be is toward well, that all depends on, really, for who made the mess, or, it could also be about as toward well, if, either way, I guess, I don't know. I'll go and just put, either way. I guess, how many of us are maybe going to respond like that? Saying, either way. Either way, are you good at cleaning up messes? Either way, if either way is really an answer or not. Or if anything, people might even say that, well, really, that what you really are trying to say is that, are you trying to be a little bit more confident with this person that you're talking to? Or if anything, that what you're trying to say is that, you're trying to get a better understanding about what is it that you do, and then, anything else that needs to be done, but still, that this is who, this is who I am, and this is what I do, and all, but still, nobody has really, ask me questions like that, during the job interview. Besides, if you're good at working with other people in the project matter, but not very many of anybody, not everybody has asked me that question, such as, are you good at cleaning up messes? Are you pretty confident in taking care of somebody else's problem and all that? And but really though, that people might say, what source of question is that? So you can maybe put on here, like, yeah, what source of question is that? But like everybody else might even say that, the responses could also be like, well, comma, well, and, so you go ahead and, yeah, exclamation point, whichever, and so people might even say that, well, I'm like, well, this is what I got to say about that, or, okay, but still. So whenever we think about that, though, and you want to know too that any source of communication, though, that it sure seems that way. That whenever we communicate with people, and at the time you want to know too that man, anything, any source of texting or communication wise and all that, and you want to know too that a lot of times whenever people are one to buy, if people are one at least 5 minutes of your time or more, I guess it's just maybe for verification purposes, or just to kind of get a cleanup. Just like if I read your messages correctly, and most of the time that's usually the case. If I read your message, correctly, or if anything, just to try to assume what you said. But I guess not everybody's going to have a clear understanding until that they're able to talk to you personally about something, or privately, or whichever it is. And so that's why it sure seems that way. That you want to ask that question to where, okay, yeah, you'll get used to it. It shouldn't bother you very much. Or if you've done it before, yeah, you've done it before. You shouldn't have too much of a problem taking care of it this next time. And people may say, yeah, well, what do you usually do whenever you talk about the sequel, huh? Whenever the sequel's announced, are you going to agree to proceed with the next process, to where if you did very well the first time, or your interactions from the first time that really went well with the clients and everybody, and people are going to be telling you that, well, why don't you go ahead and come back for the sequel, or why don't you come back for part 2 of the series, or whichever, but still. That how do you know how well your work does? And like everybody else will probably say too, that that how well do you know, how well does your work do? And you want to know too that if that's really about just getting used to the fact about, after you do an interview, and after you have a conversation with somebody about something, and you want to know too that the signs of weaknesses or anything like that, and you're thinking too that, oh, okay, well, really, that whenever it comes to in-person interviews or anything, and like everybody else will probably say too, that do you always have to remember to bring a pen and paper with you whenever you go to a lot of these interviews, or if anything, if you're going to have a conversation with somebody? And most of the time, though, it's like, a lot of times, why are you setting all these rules and restrictions about the conversations? And like everybody else will probably say to you, why? Why do you set these these rules and restrictions? Quote, rules and restrictions. What I mean by restrictions, I mean by that, I mean by to word that 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Most interviews would, 60 minutes sometimes. Sometimes it's 60 minutes. Yeah, so I guess I don't know if that's really a question, or if anything, it's just like what you call it, if that's just a mind thinking, or that's just a concern or a thought, or whichever. But still, most interviews usually last for only 30 minutes. But let's just say that if you did wind up, if the interview does wind up lasting for 5 hours, and let's just say if it does last for 5 hours, what do you got to say about that? And like everybody say, well, did you learn anything from that whole process? If you were talking to this person for 5 hours. And for how long is 5 hours usually equal to? Is that a couple of hours, or if you want to kind of give it any sort of word of saying to word it, if you want, I'll just go ahead and use affinity or something like that. I'm like, I don't think that that's really what it's called, but the affinity hour or something like that. I'll just use that. I'm like, scientists might even say that there's a name for that too, by the way. But I'm like, well, I can't really think of it right now. But still, the affinity hour. If you want to use it like an affinity hour for an example, like, for how much time is equal to this proper name, and you will likely want to know too. Well, really. How long is 5 hours usually equal to? If there's a name for that, and just put on there affinity hour. The affinity hour, and the affinity hour. If you want to maybe use 10 hours total or something like that, but let's just say for the affinity hour, just use 5 hours total. So let's just say if the interview lasts for 5 hours, that also includes receiving the responses and also reviewing your paperwork and reviewing the application, and also talking about the important discussions about from the meeting, and also what could be approved for later on, and also anything that you want to add and anything that needs to be proofread and verified by the manager or anything like that. So it's like, you may not think that it takes 5 hours just to get all that together or anything else that you want to talk about, but still, that, like everybody else might even say, that talk about for the affinity hour or anything, that what was agreed upon is to where you talk about for what you're good at and for what you do, and you just answer a few questions and all that. But you want to know too that why is it that, I'm like, a lot of times that I notice it about quite a few of these jobs or anybody that you're talking to, and you want to know too that you would think that maybe 10 or 15 minutes, at least 5 minutes, that's long enough, to be talking about something or just to ask a simple question. And so it's like, yeah, whenever people like what you do, I guess that's usually what happens. When people like what they see and like what you do and all that, or if they like you somehow, that they're going to go ahead and request to have 5 minutes more of your time, or maybe to offer you a gift, give you a gift of appreciation, thanks for your time, something like that. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that every time you think about that, the whole process of the matter, and you may think that, that some of the things that you were going to take care of from earlier, well, you think that, well, I have all day to work on this, and find out that something else comes up, and then to find out that you can't work on that. And so a lot of times it's like, yeah, all day, and all day. And everybody else might even say too that whenever you go to these interviews, and half the time you ask the simple questions, and if one of them is going to maybe say is toward, yeah, well, what do you think? What source of advice do you have? Do you think that you can give to me? What source of endorsement can you give for me, or something like that? But still, that I know with me though that every time I think about that, toward that, whenever you do start a conversation with somebody, and for verification purposes or anything like that, but it's like, you want to tell a story about something, and that story is going to maybe also include about how you wrote that letter, how you came up with that that solution, that equation. And so it's like, most of the time my answer is usually whenever I think of something and I show somebody something I thought of, and I kept thinking too that really, what is it, I the first thing that comes to my mind was really that yeah, it's all just in my imagination, it's not real. And so everybody else would probably say too nowadays, with the 21st century, I guess you could probably say too, to think about things. Think about the reality, not just the imagination. You might think that a lot of things, it seems that it's all in your imagination. Whenever you roll the dice, you're just playing around with the dice. It's not, you're not trying to score that perfect score, or whichever that you're doing. You may think that, well, really, that whenever whenever you're checking out something, or you may think that you're a number, or something, but still, just to be able to stay on track with good confidence, though, that yeah, does it really require to have somebody else to verify that information just to kind of get to know you better? So let's just say that, like everybody else will probably say too, that whenever you meet somebody and they're going to maybe ask you to, are you quite used to that by now? Are you used to people asking you questions? Are you used to people looking over your stuff and just to verify that, yeah, well, if there's a job opportunity that they know that you're good at or whichever. I'm like, well, yeah, customer service, whichever it is, and that's why the first thing that comes to your mind is that whenever you first get that email message or whenever you get a response about something, and the first thing that comes to your mind is to where, okay, well, how did you find it in the first place? So it's like everybody else might even say that, do you really have to explain how you found it, or, if you were referred, yeah, a customer or a client that seen your work, and so they were asking you, well, really, can you pass a message off for somebody or whichever, but still. But so it seems like to me that the whole process of the matter is really about the fact about that whenever you do talk to somebody, it's like, most of the time it's over how you respond, how you coordinate with somebody. If they can figure out how to respond to some of those messages on their message on their on their smartphones or on their tablets, if they can figure out how to be able to put in messages, how to type messages, and how to respond to those messages, and of course about how to provide verification purposes or transcripts or anything. And for sure that you might say that, well, that's something I don't do stuff like that, but still, that's not in my field or whichever. But if you're going to be talking to anybody, and it's possible that like everybody else will probably say too, that are you about used to that? Are you used to the fact about whenever you talk to somebody and they're gonna be telling you about stuff, and then that's just the way it is. So that whenever it comes to getting used to something, and to the point to where you're like, well, really, that does it really bother you as much as it did before? Or if anything, that you might say that you just try to ignore it as much as you can. Anything obvious, really, anything obvious that you find, and you people may think that, really, that, so far as communication and everything, but still, if people were to ask you the question, talking about messes, talking about how confident you are in, about, learning from your mistakes and also cleaning up messes, and also about what advice that you had to give to somebody, even though if that's not something that you have experience with. And so it's like, yeah, we all know that compared to having any source of journal or having any source of paperwork, notebook or anything like that, and we all know that whenever we do text and write and speak and all that, and we all know different ways of how you can do that, though, in the U102, is to where that, whenever people are going to be reading any sorts of text messages, though, and you probably thinking as to where that, yeah, well, really, that, especially if we're talking about between 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and the U102, that, while you were sleeping, that there's been what you call some updates going on with your account, to where that your device is able to detect the source of learning, the language patterns on your device, to where you no longer have to worry about typing and keying those text in. It's all radically done for you. You just got to push that button and put in the commands and all that. So anything that's convenient to you, and a lot of times it's like, well, really, if you're trying to talk to somebody, and let's just say if you're trying to write to them, and that's one thing about me, though, that it's like, it all started out with maybe a pen and pencil and paper or whatever you want to call it, and compared to this text writing and all that. And you probably like thinking too is that whenever you go to these job interviews, that whenever it comes to somebody wanting to want at least 5 minutes of your time, so that way they can ask you questions and all that. But a lot of times it sure seems that way. That talk about for the affinity hour, that 5 hours of gathering up this, or if you're having technical difficulties or anything like that. But I'm talking about that if that's really supposed to be a question, or if that's really just supposed to be is to where that do you really have to be recognized for that person just to kind of take interest in what you do. And almost everybody else would probably say too, it's all about interest. By the time you see somebody in person, for sure, by the time you see somebody in person, then chances are that even though if they really don't want to have anything to do with what you do, I'm like, yeah, well, we don't do that here, but we are willing to listen to you for the first, for 15 minutes or so. And so flexibility and then a confidence. I'm like, yeah, anything any confidence or anything like that, anything that you want to talk about, but still, I just know that that seems like to me, though, like everybody else would probably say too, that whenever you do talk to somebody in person, and it's like, well, really, I don't have that suitcase with me that shows the work. I'm like, any examples of what I do? Some of it's in the suitcase, or some of it's in my backpack. And so, like everybody else would probably say too, that yeah, well, for sure, if you do connect to that meeting, and then somebody asks to see some examples, and let's just say that yeah, well, I don't have the backpack with me right now, so I can show you some examples of my work. But what I can tell you, I'm like, yeah, the things that you want to talk about. And so yeah, most of the time, whenever you're at work, or a lot of times, and it's like, yeah, what does it usually mean whenever you do work overtime? Still, I just really think that we're talking about whenever it comes to learning things, learning new things, and talking about things and all that. And a lot of times it's like, the things for what we call, unimaginable. And so it's like, yeah, we're talking about being prepared within the next 2 years about where our technology is going, and from where, or for what you have open mind about coming soon futures. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that yeah, whenever it comes to being open often being recognized for something, but still. But on the other hand, that whenever we talk about getting used to something, that's another way of how you want to cause is toward it. Yeah, well, you're getting adjusted to it, and it seems like to me it really don't bother you as much. You don't have to set reminders about having to do something. And but still, that just another way of how you want to cause is to where, yeah, 5 minutes, 5 more minutes of your time, I guess, could also mean about, yeah, somebody want to talk to you about something, personal or privately about something. And so it's like, yeah, usually that's usually the case, that somebody wants to talk to you personally about something. And so it's like, yeah, instead of in front of all these people, I would like to, just between you and I, or whichever, and whichever it is, or 5 minutes, because they didn't quite understand what you were talking about from earlier. And anything that person may have missed, also anything that they may have missed, that person's going to ask, to go ahead and reconnect with you, and 5 more minutes of your time, if we can ask for that. And so it's like, yeah, there's a difference between from whenever you first start working your shift, and 5 hours later, and then if everything starts going pretty well, if the process starts getting faster, if the speed starts getting faster, then people may say that, yeah, well, if there's still a lot more work that needs to be done. And that's usually the case too. And sometimes it's like, if that's really an argument, or if that's really just just to try to get a few facts straight. And a lot of times that's usually what it is, trying to get a few facts straight. That if the job keeps you a little bit longer, and if the process takes a little bit longer, but still, or if anything in regards to whenever it comes to the situation. And so that's why it's like, yeah, whenever you do talk to somebody in person, and like say, yeah, well, good communication is important, but I'm also talking about that the things that you see, and the things that you do, and if you're not used to all of them, and then you're talking about a lot of rough challenges ahead. And talk about challenges. So what is a good example of a challenge? It's a test of mind. And challenges. Well, what is a good example of a challenge? It's something. Yeah, the word in dictionary I'll go and put on here. It's something that test test your ability. Something that tests your ability to think. So every time you think about that, though, it's like the something to test your ability to think. So when we think about that, and like everybody else might even say too, that to test your ability to think, and if that's really what it's really about is toward anything that you're not used to, that's really to test your ability about what's required and what can be approved for the better and all that. But still, like everybody else will probably say too, you go to that event and all that, and thinking that you're prepared for everything, and find out, the things that you really don't like, that there might be things that you're quite used to that you really don't like, like, well, do you like this or you don't like that? I'm like, well, I don't know if that's really the question, if I like it or not, but just knowing that possibly in case of, how would I handle that situation if something like that does come on, to where that any problems that come up, and you'll want to know too that what's the workflow, the straightforward line. And I know that tell people too that the ways of how you want to describe a straightforward line. And the president can maybe even say, how do you describe a straightforward line? Straightforward line. Well, what is a good example of a straightforward line? A straightforward line, it means is that not not everything happens the way upon from I'll just say based on that original promise. Original promise, and if you want to go ahead and put agreement right here, the agreement. Not everything, not everything was happened at the way that you originally thought it was, and not everything happened according to what the main focuses were, what the top agendas were. So a lot of times it's like, process that take a lot longer, and some process that were done sooner than others, and other things that came up. So really, what sorts of interactions do you have whenever it comes to the straightforward line? And like everybody else will probably say too, that whenever you start your working process, though, it sure seems that way, to where that the biggest challenge of all is all about the big pile of work, all that paperwork, all those tasks that you had to take care of. And can I really explain just by looking at a painting or a poster? Like, not really, but I'm just saying, everybody, that if we're going to be compared to going into the actual office and you see that big stack of papers or that big stack of notes or anything, mail documents or binders or anything that we're talking about, that the things that the tasks, the important tasks that need to be done. And so a lot of times it seems like that you want to start the conversation by stating as to where that you just really had to feel very good confidence about, is to where that the things that need to be done while you're in there, whenever you go into that room, whenever you go into your workspace, that it's like, you go into that little office of yours, whenever you go into that workspace, that you realize all the work that needs to be done, and all the work that needs to be verified, all the work that needs to be checked, and anything in the process or anything like that. And so that's why it sure seems that way. That what's really the key factor matter, I guess, to remember about, is to where that it's like whenever it comes to getting used to something, talk about for a straightforward line, though, that people need to recognize what is it that you do, that you are needed, for that project, for that assignment. And so I just really think, though, that being recognized is also an important topic about why some people that ask, to if we can buy 5 more minutes of your time, why they ask for at least 30 more minutes of your time, because a lot of your attention there is still needed according to the educational resources, according to the requirements, and according to the resources. That a lot of the time, based on the skills that you do, some of that is still required. So that's why, like everybody else might even say that that's a good thing or a bad thing or whichever. But I just really think, though, that we're talking about that whenever you do show somebody, like talk about something that you're good at and that you're familiar with, and so that's why it's like whenever you do go to these interviews or have meetings with people, and it's like, you may not be able to talk about everything, but first of all, you want to get a good feeling about, that person can actually see you, or whenever you are able to talk to that person in person, that you are able to do things that you haven't been able to do in a long time. And that's the first thing that's really going to come to a lot of people's mind. Now, I say that whenever you first have this interview with somebody, and the things that's been going on for the past 5 years, and you probably thinking as to where the 5 years seems like a long time ago, but that could be the case, as to where by the time you do start talking to somebody about something, it could be related to something that happened a long time ago. And so that's why that even if you did talk to this person last week, or it could have been 2 weeks ago, and so how do you handle those situations about good confidence to talk about for the straightforward line? And I guess the best ways, I guess, is more likely is about is toward it, a number of things that we have missed, from over the years of things that have been going on, but still, it sure seems that way, to where that first of all, that you really you're trying to feel more confident with the whole situation before you get into the details, that you want to go and ask this person, and the person wants to ask you, how was your work discovered, how were you discovered at the beginning, and also to follow up about the things that we talked about from the last time and all that. So that's why it sure seems that way, that the way we think about that, though, do we even think twice about that? Or do we, if anything, that you say that, yeah, well, really, what does that usually mean whenever, if you set a schedule to where that, you meet somebody for an hour, and then I find out that, okay, well, that still is not enough time to where they can better understand what is it that you're talking about. And so it's like, yeah, well, send them any, evaluations, and also, the orientation process. So yeah, send them links of the, to their websites, and also this is the information, on file that I had to share with you and all that. So it sure seems that way, that 5 more minutes of your time, everybody else might even say that if that's supposed to be, for that special moment or not. And so that's really something to think about. But anyway, that's just some good source of information, that helps. But anyway, what does that usually mean whenever people, want more of your time? And most of the time, it's like, well, really, that if that's really supposed to be for the special treatment, or if that's just another way of how people become interested in what you do. And one of those interests is maybe going to be about is toward that something that they want to show you, and also that, whenever it comes to topics, though, whenever you bring up a subject matter, then that's going to kind of ring the bell to somebody. And yeah, what do you mean by ringing the bell? Yeah, ring the bell. Ring the bell. Ring the bell. Yeah, ringing a bell. What does that usually mean whenever the bell is ringing? That means by, good confidence. Good confidence yeah, how about intelligence, good confidence and intelligence, and also something, something that is a lot more recognized. Or I can just say, that's more recognized, but yeah, it needs to be recognized. So a lot of times it sure seems that, something that, it needs to be recognized. So, if you're familiar with something that, for what they're talking about, and, good confidence, for what rings a bell. And, so a lot of times it's like, you want to start the keywords by saying recognized or, anything, for what you speak, anything for what you speak about gives that other person, that other individual, good good understanding about about what you do. So if you want to include like about 2 or 3 sentences, at least 500 words, and like everybody else will probably say too, if you want to be a good writer one of these days, and thinking is toward it, you go and write up a few comments and quotes about something, and like anybody else will probably say too, that mind communication. Whenever you're able to talk to somebody about something, and then communicate with somebody about something, and it's like, do you think that more likely the characters of the link are going to go up or down? Like, so far as that, well, if you can only text maybe 150 words at a time or something like that, all in one complete sentence or anything like that, but still. So, the whole workflow and the whole process, but still. Talk about the straightforward line, though, and, getting used to something, but still. That whenever people, ask to buy, more of your time, and but still, everybody else might even say that the affinity hour or anything, however you want to pronounce it by, you're probably thinking that, well, really that you try to spend only half an hour, if you want to have a conversation with somebody about something that sometimes I can tell here lately, especially if we're talking about recovering from an illness or something like that, we're talking about sometimes it's an hour. And you talk to somebody for an hour about something, it could be a few important facts and all that, but still, that like everybody else might even say that did you learn anything in particular just by starting that conversation, and for really, where did it all start, and anything confident that you learned about the whole experience. And everybody else might even say that that, well, I actually based on the first 2 pages of that description, though, is not all the details. So like everybody else would probably say too, that whenever you read those documents and everything, and it's like, well, just to have a better understanding about something. But usually, though, that a lot of companies would probably say that they would at least like to talk to the person rather than just be looking at pages of documents and everything. And I guess the key factor of matter is just to kind of know about is as to where the papers are provided mainly to offices that need to verify the information manually. That's not like everybody else would probably say too, that that's not really a replacement for okay, well, that person don't have to be present during the time of this meeting or whatever. That's not really the case. That paperwork comes in whenever, just to verify on their systems about anything that needs to be recorded and all that. But whenever we're talking about any questions of what comes to your mind, whenever you talked about certain things, anything that rings the bell, and you're probably thinking too that, that's whenever that they want to talk to they want to talk to the person about that stuff. And so, like I say that, yeah, well, when they're speaking about that, and you're probably thinking too, well, really, that you may know this person, or yeah, that person is pretty confident to get to know you a little bit more, especially if we're talking about during dinner or maybe at lunch or something like that. If you start talking to them about stuff, and you're probably thinking too that, really, the first thing that really comes to my mind though is that, yeah, whenever I first start working on a lot of this database, I was actually working at my own time. I was working at my own time, and after I woke up from that afternoon nap or something like that, if I was resting earlier, if I was recovering from, if I was recovering, I'm like, yeah, if I was resting earlier, if I, yeah, that night, yeah. So a lot of times, almost everybody else might even say too that, yeah, while you were sleeping, that some of the work, yeah, some of that work has already been done for you. You just got to confirm that information. You just got to verify that if everything looks correct and everything. So that's just another thing about that, is toward it, all your hard work and effort that you put into something, and you might think that, yeah, well, there might be something at some point. You put 6 weeks worth of work into something, and then something more likely is only going to take 5 minutes to take care of it. So, like everybody else might even say too, where that, does it really need to be recognized, or if anything, that, if people do ask to buy more of your time, or, like anybody say, yeah, what do you mean by buy more of my time? And I'll go and put on here too that, okay, yeah, can we buy, more of your time? And let's just say that if somebody were to ask that question, and 102 is to where, well, really, can we buy more of your time? And if we can buy more of your time, is that can you explain? Can you explain in quotes what is it that you're talking about on this document? Can you explain in quotes? Yeah, can you explain in quotes? Can you explain in quotes what you're talking about? So a lot of times, for in quotes, that what you're talking about, according to this document. So a lot of times, that according to this document, so whenever you do get any reviews or responses about anything on the account, though, a lot of times it sure seems that way, that most of the time that somebody's going to ask, you're working there in the offices and all that, they're going to ask you to please explain what is it that what this is or what that is, in quotes, and also anything that you may have been working compared to what the original document said and all that. So it's like, yeah, can we buy more of your time? So it's like, so most of the time it's all about explaining the working process. So a lot of times, like everybody say, if you're going to be working with any clients or anybody, that more likely they're going to say that, really, that whenever somebody say, can we buy more of your time, more of your time, and let's say if they abbreviate that to like maybe only 4 words and say more of your time or something like that, like just like a short phrase, a short, any sorts of abbreviation, for more of your time, please. More of your time, please. Can you please explain? Can you please explain? Quote, what is it we're looking at? What is this? What is this paperwork? And so that's why it sure seems that way, that whenever you first start working on something and then you try to realize what's going on and what the interactions are a lot of times, and that's usually explained just by that, you put 5 or 6 weeks worth of your time and work into something, and then by at some point that something may only take 5 minutes to take care of it, but really 5 minutes, it seems like 5 minutes can really only be extended mainly for those who put in at least a lot of more of the hard work. And let's just say if you are working overtime, so at the time people might say, well, does that really have to include 6 weeks? I'm like, well, It could probably also include 3 weeks. We can just use that. Yeah, 3 weeks. Any hard work, 3 weeks of your hard work, can make a difference. And like anybody say to even 5 minutes can also make a difference too. Depending on what the process is, whichever. But still, that 3 weeks. 3 weeks of hard work. I'll go ahead and put hard work. So the way we think about that though, that whenever it comes to putting 3 weeks worth of work in, and you're likely want to know that too, is toward that. That 3 weeks seems like an awful long time. Just because you think that maybe something should happen a lot sooner than that. You think that maybe something that due to technical problems and due to things being postponed and delayed and all that, and you're probably wondering what's taking so long and with the process. But still, but I guess another way of how you want to say get used to something is also another way of saying is toward whenever you first start working on something, that the first thing that you really think about mainly is like the important topics, not really just too much about all the distractions going on or whichever, but really just so that way you can stay mainly focused on the most important task. And one of those most important tasks, of course, is going to maybe be about, if for sure, is that the top agendas that need to be done. And you're thinking too that, the top agendas that you really want to make sure that you want to get done, of course, is like just to verify a lot of the information, making sure that everything's all correct, from the work that you've done previously, and also anything new that you want to add or anything like that, and anything else. But you're still like everybody else will probably say too that whenever you work a job, a lot of times it's like you really see the big picture whenever it comes to looking at documents and talking and coordinating with somebody. And you want to know too that first of all, it's like really, how do you know if that job is right for you? And then also that whenever you do get any responses about your profile page or anything, and you're likely first want to know too that you were not trained to do that stuff. You didn't go to school to do all that stuff. And so it's like a lot of times it seems like it's all, marketing team, and also about people picked you. They want you to do this job just because, for what reason? And so like everybody else will probably say too, does that person really have to explain why they want you to do that job? Or if anything, that, really, that, we're trying to show you something. We're trying to give you good confidence. We're trying to provide you with good resources, good details, and good resources, top of your promotion or something. But still, but on the other hand, too, to talk about for the jobs plan here, we're talking about the agenda here. That whenever it comes to extended period of time, though. That it seems like to me that almost everything has to be pre-recorded before anything else can go any further, such as we need to show proof of the progress that's been made from the past for the past 3 weeks, what progress has been made. And like everybody else will probably say too, the first 10 days, what progress has been made for the first 10 days, since you talked about something. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that why set the rules and the guidelines now whenever you may not, you don't really know the full story, the details about something, but still, that based on everybody else's experience, though, it sure seems that way. That number one, I actually want to talk about the things that I learned independently, the things that I figured out at my own time, where I'm able to share them instead of people trying to get into trying to anybody might even say too that we all have our own hobbies and our own in our interests and all that. But I've been kind of waiting for that opportunity toward it's something that I can speak about, something that I yeah something that I developed and something I put together, so that way I can share those ideas instead of people trying to think that yeah, well, there's other people who like say, yeah, for sure if you develop something at your own time, that means that you set the rules and the guidelines for that. And like, well, really, that any sorts of instructions that you want to give to somebody else, and you're probably thinking too that really that if people are really going to listen to you, but really only if it works, or if anything that, well, really if they know exactly what you're talking about, they've experienced it and they've seen it. I've seen it, I know what you're talking about. And so people might say that they got good confidence about that. But anyway, for being recognized. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and talk about for good confidence and being recognized, and also just to kind of get to know everybody else as well, for how they found your work and how they get to know your work as well. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.